Hey everybody. So, follow-up video for my blog just about the definition of winning and why it's important to understand what winning means, how you define winning, and then also what it means to lose and why that's important. So, to start off, one of the things I think is really wonderful about martial arts training is that you are faced with losing often. And whether that's sparring or rolling or doing scenarios or doing competitions or doing whatever, even the day-to-day grind of training is that you are likely to lose quite often, especially when you start out. And that helps us develop resilience and analyze our performance and get better over time and so on and so forth. That being said, if we lose all the time, then we can become unmotivated or feel frustrated with our training or lose faith in our training. Keep in mind that being in an environment where you win all the time is just as bad. Right? So if you win all the time, probably means your training is not realistic and you might develop some, other issues, different problems to losing all the time, but still not good, right? Ego, false confidence, so on and so forth. So we need to find that balance between winning and losing. Now, in order for that to happen, we have to calibrate what winning means to us. So I want you to keep in mind a couple of things that really help me when I train. The first one is know what your training outcomes are. Okay, so for example, for me, training is always about self-defense first. That's what I'm most interested in, and that's what my training focuses on. That doesn't mean that I don't spar, roll, or wrestle. I think that's an integral part of learning self-defense. You have to develop those skills. But my goal is not to become, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or judo or boxing expert per se, is to take those skills and translate them to a context of self-defense. With that in mind, you also have to recognize that different training outcomes use different modes of training and training methods to get to those outcomes. And quite often what that means is when you're switching from one mode or training method to another, you may not perform as well. Where that can become frustrating is where you might compare your performance in one area to performance in another. For example, your ability to hit, a flying armbar or a go-go plata or whatever in BJJ has literally zero correlation to your ability to defend yourself from a knife attack. Okay, so what that means is if I'm training for self-defense and I'm going into a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, I need to calibrate what my expectations are, considering the fact that I'm going into a totally different training outcome in different training mode. What I need to do is then when I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what are the things in here that I can apply to a self-defense context and how do I train that in a way that's more relevant for what it is that I want to achieve. So make sure you understand what your training outcomes are and don't compare winning in one training mode to another because they're not necessarily parallel. Cool, so that's that. The other thing you then have to think about is who are the people that you're training with? If you're jumping with people who are much more experienced than you, they are likely to get beaten. Reality, right? If that's the case, you need to calibrate what winning means to you in that particular context. Okay, so what does winning mean in a training session where maybe, first of all, I'm training with somebody who's much less experienced than me? What does winning mean then? If I'm training with somebody with similar experience than me, what does winning mean then? If I'm training with somebody much more experienced than me, what does winning mean then? Because winning in those contexts will be different. If I'm sparring with somebody much more advanced than me, winning most of the time means doing a little bit better than I did last time, knowing and accepting that I'm likely going to lose. Either that or focusing on one specific thing that I want to try and achieve in the round. Land more jabs or, get a sweep or this or that, whatever it is. As long as you get that, consider that a win, even if the pure points version for competition, you might have lost that round. So focus on the small wins depending on who you're training with. And lastly, you have to accept that sometimes winning simply means losing less than you lost last time. Especially when you're starting out or you're jumping into something you're not familiar with. If you're sparring with people who are likely to be more experienced than you, then you're probably going to lose. In that case, what you need to do is calibrate winning to improvement, right? Similar to what I mentioned in the previous one. So for example, if somebody taps me out 5 times in a round, maybe the next time I roll with that person, if I only get tapped out 4 times, that's winning. Okay, so as long as you're improving. So it's really important to be able to find and calibrate what winning means to you in different contexts. Then you have to make sure that you do that really before every training session that you do, and most of the time, even with every round that you do. What does winning mean for me now? When you do it that way, you'll be able to achieve a couple of things. Number one, you won't get frustrated if you consistently lose, because losing will have a different meaning. 2, you'll be able to critically analyze better what you need to work on because there's less emotion involved with it. And 3, you won't lose motivation. So write down some of the stuff, have a think about it before every training session and before every round, and let me know how you go.